Well, hello everyone. Show you right here. I'm talking about for responsibilities, and I have right here is this painting right here, and this right here is actually shows right here is example right here of me right here. And let's just say if we were talking about like a type of story right here, and let's just say that story is going to maybe be talking about maybe something that you were working on, maybe whenever you were doing your homework or anything that kind of comes to your mind, and let's just say that if you will be maybe writing a paper, maybe taking down notes, of any kind. And so let's just say that if you want to go ahead and maybe talk about a story about something that you came up with, and like let's just say if you were thinking about something, and from based on from what you were reading about, and then what you figured out, just by yeah, writing down a few ideas and kind of brainstorming any ideas, something like that. But I have right here this right here, of course, like anybody else will probably say too, if you're going to be trying to tell a story, and that story is going to maybe like you want to maybe use at least maybe 5 or maybe 10 or so pages of a book or something like that, just to be able to tell all the kids a story. But still, but you have right here, this right here will be an example right here of a story right here, and showing right here of an example right here of me right here, along with like a backpack right here, a backpack along with some paper right here. So with this paper right here, that there's going to be, it's going to show something like yeah, that study hours, or anything such as mathematical studies, or anything such as maybe papers or written documents or anything like that. It could also, yeah, inventions or anything like that. But I want to talk about right here, talk about for made in America right here, and so it's like yeah, that talk about for like that, whenever we want to explain about the key responsibility, though, that a lot of parents might even want to know too, that what's the best way of how to explain that. And everybody else might even say that, well, really, that whenever it comes to taking care of things and the responsibilities, that it sure seems that way to where that, yeah, well, that yeah, that whenever it comes to understanding something, and also like everybody else might even say too, that whenever we think about responsibility, it seems like that yeah, it's like a claim to where that we have to say something, and knowing about that, yeah, for who's for anybody that might even say too that, well, okay, who's in charge of you're speaking up about something, who's really in charge of taking care of something, and that if there's any problems or anything like that. So a lot of times it seems like to me that a lot of it has to do with the fact about that there's a problem with a work study. If there's for anything, any technical failures or anything that goes wrong with whichever other work in process, it seems like to me like, yeah, anybody also probably say too that, yeah, well, that's another way of how you want to call for responsibility also. But another way of how you want to describe a responsibility is also measured about is toward, yeah, that this is this is an idea that I came up with right here, and I just want to tell everybody about a story toward it. If this study works, if it works, and then maybe a lot of people will go along with it. And so like just to kind of explain about what what you're really about what you were able to come up with, and about what to study about the, if it's science and technology, that sorts of stuff. But I actually want to talk about right here is actually to study about if you're going to be writing a paper, and let's just say that any sorts of materials that you're going to be getting together, gathering up, and let's just say that if you want to talk about the story to where that yeah, you want to think about maybe a study, or maybe like a little science experiment, and 102 that, yeah, just to make the long story short, that you're working on this for maybe for about 5 hours and maybe 10 hours total, and 102 that with that experiment, that there was something about that experience that really gained a lot of knowledge. And so that's why it sure seems that way to where people might even say that yeah, well, if you want to just kind of develop a draft, and if you want to kind of get some ideas about what you were trying to build. So it sure seems that way that yeah, well, whenever it comes to building something, whenever it comes to working on something, that what's the best way of how to describe is to word it, okay, of how to be able to improve it better, how to be able to make it better. In order to be able to make it better, do you think that it requires you to spend more time with it, or just do you really maybe have to have like maybe a second or a third opinion from somebody else, just to be able to get some better ideas, for something, anything like that. But really, that talking about that the idea that I was thinking about whenever I was working on this actually was talking about for Subject Archive. It's like, that was actually a study about is to where that how to be able to build your ideas on top of other ideas. So it's like, yeah, Subject Archive. So let's just say if you're going to be drawing a shape, you're going to be drawing a shape, and then from that shape that you go ahead and draw another object on the side of that shape, and then if you want to maybe build like a character, like do anything such as if it's maybe Photoshop, or if you're just going to go ahead and just draw like a few shapes and draw like a rough a draft about different shapes, and okay, what are those shapes represent and all, but so yeah, that so whenever I look at this right here, that it's going to kind of say is to where yeah, that kind of gets you an idea about is to where that you holding a backpack right there, and that backpack's going to contain certain different objects, and that object, those objects of course are going to include something like a calculator, maybe a notebook, or maybe easy to remember binder or something like that. So yeah, that a lot of things that your backpack could contain, but then also that talk about for easy to remember notes right here. So I know a lot of those your school kids will probably say too that yeah, that just a little notebook about this size right here, that you're probably thinking too that there was only about maybe 11 pages altogether, but still that if you really were trying to develop, if you were trying to generate some ideas or write down a few notes about what you want to keep in mind about, yeah, an idea that could come, like say people may say that, yeah, whenever it comes to generating ideas and forming a rough draft and all about, anything that comes to your mind. But I know most of the time it seems like to me though that yeah, first thing is first is that you kind of want to begin is to where you start talking about a story to where that yeah, you try an experiment, but a lot of times it's like, well, how do you know if it's going to work necessarily? Well, if you want to do test, if you want to test something just to see if it works, and then just to kind of do the studies about, okay, what all that the what are these facts that matter about how that experiment work in the first place. So a lot of times it's like, yeah, you want to talk about a story here, but talking about what's the best way of how to describe your responsibilities also, and so a lot of the kids might even say that whenever it comes to responsibilities, though, that whenever it does come to responsibility, that most of the time that parents might say that yeah, well, for who's in charge, really, for who's in charge, that if you're going to be taking responsibility for like for an account, or it could also maybe be something that you were working on, and people might even say this to where that yeah, it's another way of how do you want to say is to where whenever you're holding, I'm like, yeah, whenever you're holding something or whenever you're working on something, and like everybody else will probably say too that that really like anybody else will probably say, yeah, yeah, especially if you're just testing the equipment, or if you're just experimenting around with something. And let's just say if it's maybe a chemistry project or something like that, or maybe calculus, how do you know if this experiment is going to work? How do you know if it's going to make any sorts of change? So we probably think is toward it, the whole idea about working on something with it, reading off of a draft or writing any sorts of papers, though, probably say that, really that we probably say that, yeah, well, it's probably recommended that you're professionally to where you go ahead and write a draft of a paper toward what are the plans so far as if you're working on something, what are the top agendas for what you want to work on, and then how you would handle that to where in case if something goes wrong, this is how you would handle it. So let's just say that looking at this right here, like you say, yeah, well, this right here actually shows if you're just you want to think about an idea that you want to try out an experiment, and then want to know too about how well do you think that experiment's going to turn out to where if something that does succeed or if something fails. So it sure seems that way to where that anything that you learned from your own time, of course, and you're likely learned to where how do you know if it works or not. But I just really think that really, what is a good source of information whenever it comes to keeping things in mind and keeping things memorized and knowing about that, for how do you know whenever an idea works? And a lot of times it's like, well, really, that based on your experiences toward the things that you see whenever you try something out. And so a lot of times it's like, yeah, well, first of all, that maybe if you're trying to agree, if you're trying to get everybody else to agree on going with this idea or this plan toward it, yeah, if you want to try and develop something such as, okay, these are my suggestions right here. If you're trying to change the way that something is working, though, and a lot of times, I guess you might say, yeah, but that's a lot of times that's computer computer operation along with data science and along with coding, typical coding though. But if you want to talk a story about right here, that this right here, I actually drew this picture right here. That this right here was supposed to be example right here of me getting off the school bus, those years ago. And how do I say, yeah, the way that I learned actually was actually studying about more ideas that came to my mind whenever I would draw a shape. Whenever I would draw that shape, and let's just say if it's a circle or a square, that a lot of times that I would kind of get my ideas just by looking at something very carefully. And everybody else might say that, you go ahead and write a story about something that you were working on, and I actually tell everybody too that it was not over a shape actually, it was over a kite. Yeah, a kite. I was actually, yeah, paper airplanes and kites. So that's the type of stuff that I was doing back when I was young. Yeah, if you were working on a paper or something like that, and if you want to fold it up into make like a little paper airplane or something like that, and you would actually try to make a paper airplane, give it wings, and then actually trying to throw it in the air just to see if it flies and all. But still, that really, in case of anybody that may say that when we're talking about the type of studies here, and you're likely want to know too that you draw a shape, and then with that shape, that shape is if it's going to mean anything, or if you want to set a code or some sort. But still, that everybody else might even say that really that the things that you learned at home are just totally different from what you learned at the office compared to what you learned in the lab, and it seems like that's always the case. And everybody else will probably say too that the things that you're doing at home are just totally different from what you learned at the lab. And you want to know too, yeah, the same toolkit and maybe the same art supplies, the same supplies and maybe the same tools and all that. But it sure seems that way toward it. Yeah, well, number one though, it seems like is to where that yeah, you may have the same tools or maybe that yeah, but still that I guess it seems like to me though that a lot of it has to do with the fact of matters is toward the yeah, buying yourself some more time, and also whenever you're able to study something about something at your own time independently, and like everybody else will probably say too, that whenever you're at home in your own work area, and you probably think is toward yeah, you're able to concentrate a lot more on what achievements that you're trying to build. Whenever you try to build something that a lot of times it seems like, yeah, put together a puzzle and all that, that seems to be totally different than compared to, if you're going to be at the office and maybe if you're going to be working with a partner or somebody, and you're going to be you're working on something and you might get the same results, whichever. But I just really think too that whenever you think about this right here, that looking at this sketch right here, And I want to know too is to where that if you have an idea for something, and you want to know too is to where okay, everybody else might even tell you too that well, why don't you speak up about it? I'm like, well, how do I know? For who's listening? But still, but based on from my experience, though, it sure seems that way to where that you get real excited about something. You're like, yeah, I like a new idea that comes to your mind. But a lot of times, it sure seems that way to where that really, if it's is it really best to tell a story first before you actually get into the main objectives? And a lot of those will probably be is to where that yeah, well, you start talking to other people about it, and that you start telling them about how it works and what you're able to come up with, that sorts of stuff. But really, about I want to include this right here of talking about for bringing the study for bringing our work home. So it sure seems that way to where if I were to be talking about include this in like a story to where that you start talking about a story to where you start taking down notes on something, or maybe if you have an idea for something that maybe not everybody else has tried out, and you're probably likely want to know too that really that when people see you working on something, and then chances are that yeah, that's maybe going to approach other people's idea for possibly what sorts of skills that are going to work. But I have right here, yeah, made in America right here. But I just want to show everybody here that this right here that this your drawing, because I know that what's the best way, and I know parents might even say too that how do you explain to your kids about key responsibilities, especially checking out a book from the library or anything that you're going to be working on, and you're probably want to know too is toward a yeah, well, another way of how you want to call a responsibility is it's like a task. Yeah, it's exactly it's a task to where that you are in charge of making sure that the things that need to be updated, you in charge of making sure that if there's whatever that needs to be done on these tasks, and anything that goes wrong. So a lot of times it seems like that whenever you do think about that, a lot of times it's like yeah, well, that most parents might even say that do you think that maybe you should go ahead and write a paper about how you would react toward anything that goes wrong, about how to fix something, and also about go ahead and just write some ideas down toward how you'll be able to handle something whenever it comes to just to improve the work, improving the work and just developing more ideas at a later on point. So it's like a script, like anybody say, kind of like a transcript to where a lot of that data that's recorded, and I know that we probably think is toward that really that if you start writing some stuff down, and let's just say if you draw a shape, that shape is going to kind of keep in mind is toward a number of things that you can maybe think about is toward, but really number one though, it's got to work. In case if anybody may want to know too that most of the time it's like yeah, it seems like it's all about five people on a team that they're going to go ahead and just get some ideas for what they want to use, and the people I think is toward yeah, well, does that happen most of the time to where whenever people do get carried away about something, and most of the time it's all about is toward it really if they see if this team sees how something works, and then let's just say that if they're needing the ideas immediately, then chances are that they're going to say that go ahead and yeah, go to the lab, or but anybody say that is toward that yeah, well, what does it usually mean whenever you do get carried away about something? I'm talking about the type of carried away I'm talking about is the type of carried away toward it that you're anxious to find out about what the results are going to be. And if you're really needing the attention immediately, if you're really needing something done immediately, and also, if anybody else will probably say to that you're really curious and anxious to find out what happens next after that. So a lot of times it seems like to me though that yeah, that you start writing down something, and yeah, you go and write down a paper, and this is going to be me right here. Spending so much time, in the bedroom, or maybe getting off the school bus those years ago, and you go ahead and draw, write down a paper of about maybe 50 to 100 sentences or something like that. You just start out the sentences by saying, yeah, that the things that you're interested in, but then also whenever it comes to developing ideas. And do you want to start out the sentence by saying the, or tried, or something like getting ready to, or something like that? But really, though, that the typical book cover, in case of anybody that may want to wear the typical book cover, that you want to go and start out with the image like this. But everybody else will probably say too that this right here, easy to remember notes, especially. But really, though, that but whenever it comes to taking care of the responsibilities, also, that a lot of times people may even want to know too that did it start off with a backpack, or did it really just start out with maybe with a briefcase or anything like that? But still, that you're taking charge of the data, of the resources, and the important tasks that need to be done. And a lot of times, you might say is to where that, yeah, well, if you can set any ground rules about these key responsibilities, and people may say is to where that, it's yours. If you really that people, in case if anybody were to want to ask that question, to where that really that you know, really, how many people are really going to, are really going to take the responsibility for something, maybe over the fact about, well, really, if it don't work, and then for sure that you're okay, well, those ideas are yours, but still, that if it's really over the fact about, who really wants to argue about, their fair share of the work, so far as if that task does work, and then, and then it's all about trying to get everybody else to say that, yeah, well, I want half of the data. I'm like, yeah, yeah, half of that, or yeah, I deserve some credit for that. So a lot of times it's like, yeah, if it's going to be about work that you were doing, and everybody else might even say that, yeah, I think I deserve some credit for that, or something like that. So really, that if it's going to include any source of contract, or any source of agreement to the form, to where, in case if anybody may say that, yeah, it did not really start out with a backpack. Unfortunately, it started out by email. People may say that, well, really, if you're going to be talking to an expert in 102, that yeah, it was by email. Actually, it was by email. It was over the email. It was not over anything such as, okay, that backpack, like, that backpack, but that backpack contains anything such as belongings, or any personal belongings, or anything like that, calculators, and maybe MacBooks, or anything like that that you got in that backpack. But still, whenever you're going to be a young student, getting off the school bus, or maybe getting out of that taxi cab, or getting out of getting leaving the lab, or I'm like, yeah, getting out of the car, and you're probably thinking too, is to what exactly is coming to your mind whenever you have your school stuff with you, such as to where, yeah, if you were just if you were to start out the sentence, to a paragraph, just by saying something like that, yeah, that today, I am working on shapes, with these shapes that anything that comes to your mind whenever you're kind of forming a rough draft. And a lot of times, I see that a lot of times, actually, everybody, that and I know sometimes that people don't want to spend any longer than an hour working on something, just because that maybe if it does tire their mind out to you, that, yeah, your mind gets real tired after you really start focusing on what you're working on. And I guess you could say that, yeah, well, you set that that essay aside just because that you decide to pull out a puzzle, or any source of activity, just to kind of get your mind up off the stress and off the tension, all that. But let's just say that that whenever it comes to understanding about the drafts and all. But anyway, but yeah, I just want to talk to everybody here about that, about the key responsibility right there. And everybody else will probably say too that about the draft also. But anyway, you say talk about responsibility. You talk about made in America. Anyway, thanks for watching, everyone, and have a great day.